Good evening, one and all. People all across the planet who are watching us on TV. This is the Water Quality Management Committee. Today is Wednesday, April 29th.
Let me know.
And we're going to commence the meeting. We allow 2 hours to get through. If we don't get to anything within 2 hours, we bump it to the next meeting. We've changed our schedule around a little bit from the past. We used to have reports of members towards the end. We've moved it up. The first item is always going to be summary of recent environmental actions by other communities and agencies, because Ed religiously tracks this stuff. And I'm not putting a clock on you, Ed, but keep it under 20 minutes.
Oh, piece of cake. Not a lot new in the world, but a couple of items of interest. I think the one is on April 24th. MEPA Environmental Monitor publication had a decision by the Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs that they did not need a new EIR for Mashpee-Wakeby satellite plant that they have planned. So what's happening there is Mashpee decided a decentralized treatment plant for the Mashpee-Wakeby pond area would be appropriate because of conditions at the pond. And the Secretary, through a 302-page decision and background, said this is not a new major project or change that requires a new EIR. It is riding along on the original EIR for Mashpee's overall sewer plan. And interesting to note that part of her decision is based on the fact that these plans as submitted are intended to evolve as things change, whether it's good or bad changes, density changes, new technologies. So in all of her detailed analysis, she said because plans are updated every 5 years, this is an update to a pre-existing plan that actually goes back to 2012 or 2015. So Mashpee saved a lot of money in having to go through a detailed EIR. What's going to happen up there is a satellite treatment plant with 3.2 miles of low-pressure mains and serve a grand total of 210 houses, figuring with a permit of 102,000 gallons per day. And you know, it was an interesting decision because of how she recognizes that these plans are not carved in stone. Data gets better, data gets worse, technology improves. So that is an interesting point. Let's see, what else? Falmouth, the Great Pond Phase 1, just in case everybody doesn't look at the website and read the updates, the low-pressure mains that were supposed to start earlier this month have now been kicked to mid-May or later due to a supply chain issue. So sewering there, laying the mains in the street and putting in laterals will not happen for some weeks. Let's see, Snug Harbor, Kennel Cover.
The 28 part is on hold? Or?
No, not 28, the neighborhoods around Perch Pond and that, where they were going to put in low-pressure sewer lines. So the actual start of that construction is pushed out to mid-May or later because of supply chain issues. I don't know if the pipe, Amy could probably elaborate on that, but.
Are they going to continue with 28?
They're busy there right now.
Hi, Amy Lowell, wastewater superintendent. So the Great Pond Phase 1 project, the contractor has a crew working on Route 28 between Sandwich Road and Mara Vista Extension. And they now expect to finish that section in the week of May 11th. So they will be likely moving to the other side of Mara Vista in the week that follows, which is the only week that we have left before Memorial Day. So we'll be en Route 28 until the Friday before Memorial Day. What Ed correctly said is that our initial schedules showed that low-pressure sewers were going to start being installed, I think, early April, and the contractor has not yet begun that. They actually, they ended up switching suppliers, and so they don't have the materials yet. It is not an impact on the overall project schedule. I got a couple of questions about this. People are concerned that the contractor their schedule is slipping. The low-pressure sewer is expected to take about a year to install, whereas the overall project schedule is 21 months. So they had originally planned to start sooner, but they're now planning to start later. It doesn't affect the overall schedule. It just means that the low-pressure sewer is starting a little later than planned.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
So, they do publish on a weekly basis in the town website updates to the project, what streets are going to be closed, what activity will be taking place, but I know not everybody does that, so I take this opportunity to bring it forth. The only other thing that is of major interest as a neighboring community, our good friends in Mashpee, and I don't know, Maggie may say some things a little later in the meeting about this, but a big milestone will be taking place Monday, May 4, and also on May 9. The town meeting and then a general election in Mashpee, and there are two items that are very important to the overall health of watersheds, including especially Wacoit Bay, which is one we share with Mashpee. And there's an Article 4 at town meeting, and it's for $12 million to begin design of a wastewater facility and collection system for the Wacoit Bay watershed. The goal is to sewer 1,050 homes, which would reduce the nitrogen into Wacoit Bay, they estimate, by 30%. Pretty significant. It requires a 2/3 vote, this article, at town meeting on May 4. And Mashpee's rules are different in that any registered voter can vote at town meeting. It is not a representative town meeting as Falmouth has. Should it get that 2/3 majority, then it also needs to, on May 9th, annual election, pass by a simple majority. So it's purely the design phase. Eventually, they would see this as like a $108 million project, but it's 1,000 homes, and it would have a hopefully very positive impact not only on Wacoit Bay, but also some of the freshwater streams and ponds that are part of that watershed. My source for my latest data on this, as a point of interest, is something called Rollcast. And Rollcast is a, excuse me, a publication of Trout Unlimited. And Trout Unlimited is the organization that has been restoring the Quashnet River to a viable, very productive trout stream. So they detailed in their latest newsletter about this project, and they went into a lot of details that, they've been working for 40 years on that watershed, and the goal to clean it up, which they've done, reroute it so that there are nice pools for breeding of the trout. And the sewering will do two things, which we've talked about a lot. Remove the nitrogen, but also the phosphorus that's impacting the Quashnet as a freshwater stream and some of the ponds in that area that feed into the watershed. So it's kind of a double action project. Important, and hopefully it'll pass, but it's a big bite. Mashpee has made some tremendous commitments going forward to improve things. The Mashpee-Wakeby project is a small amount of houses, but it is primarily to improve a freshwater pond, nitrogen, and even more importantly, the phosphorus. So we'll be interested, I will be interested, and I'll let you know how that goes. That's all I got.
Okay. Ken, you want to give us an update on where the Snug Harbor PRB is?
The Snug Harbor PRB, we've submitted, Kristen has submitted the application to Conservation Commission. And for review, originally we were going to meet May 6th for that, and I guess it's been moved now to May 13th. So we're still kind of in the holding pattern there.
All right. I have my name on the next one. It's a short one. It's Perch Pond, not Eel Pond, if you got your agenda in front of you. But as you recall, we got a grant a year or so ago, thanks to Kristen's efforts, as always. And we have two of them, and they're both now in place for the season, gathering water quality data in Perch Pond, which, as the sewers come into place and get put in place, we're going to have some fairly specific baseline, pre-sewer installation baseline data out of Perch Pond, and then we can keep comparing to it. We anticipate, much like we saw on Little Pond, improved quality, that we'll see improved quality there. Ken, back to you, the PRB on Shorewood.
So I was in communication with both Kristen and Matt Charette about this. I guess April 13th, they completed some sampling. They have a small amount of money to do 2 samplings this year. The only data they really have so far is what they get as they pull the samples using an instrument to measure oxygen, for example. It still shows anoxia in the area where the emulsified vegetable oil was added, so that suggests that the system's probably still working, but they don't yet have back their nutrient data.
And that was, excuse me.
The 5-year dose.
Yeah.
The 2-year dose, or one-year dose?
It was a 2-year initial.
2-year dose is still working, what, 5 years later?
6 years later.
The 1-year dose really didn't even make it through
But
1 year. So who knows what's going on with that?
Part of that clarification is the area that we thought we were capturing with the Shorewood Drive, once we got out there, it was a smaller area. So the 2-year dose was based upon more homes than we were actually capturing. So the fact that it should run 4 to 6 years is not completely unexpected, but we're just continuing to see how it works. That's all. Amy, I have you as number 2 on the agenda. Or it might be Kristen, I don't know. Which one of you wants to do this?
Hi. So I am going to ask Kristen to do most of the talking, but we wanted to give a brief update on the watershed management planning project. I spoke at the beginning of this month about the project and the process overall. Kristen Rathjen of ScienceWares has been working with GHD on putting together the initial plans for each watershed. We wanted to show you one example watershed first. We're starting with I'll call it the easiest one because it's Little Pond, where the work has already been done. There's a lot of effort that goes into updating the data and looking at the watershed in the light of the new information we have. Kristen and GHD have done a lot of work on this just to get us where we are. The Little Pond, a reason to show it to you first is to just show you how this data can be presented and as a template for how we would present this for all of the other ponds in town. I'm going to let Kristen do the presenting because she was doing the work, not me, and you have heard her do very similar presentations over time. I am going to pipe in at one point about our IA, how we're thinking about IA's options. Get started. Thanks.
That's not my nose. Kristen Rathjen, ScienceWares. So like Amy said, we've started to do some of the detailed work for what's required for watershed planning, and we're working watershed by watershed. And just the broad overview, what we're doing is we're using more recent water use data, so 2001 through 2004, to essentially update the wastewater loads, so the septic loads for each watershed. We are not updating any of the land use, the assumptions that the MEP made for fertilizers, stormwater, any of those. We're keeping those terms the same. So we're essentially just updating wastewater to see how that compares from the time of the MEP and TMDL to now, to see what the actual nitrogen load reduction targets are and what those implementations have meant. I'm not going to go into the background of Little Pond like I did with geoboundaries. What we're looking at here is pretty much a summary table of what a proposed compliance approach would be. So the first line up here is what the TMDL has as the controllable nitrogen load. TMDL is mostly based on the MEP. Sometimes there's differences in them. The TMDL document is the regulatory document, so that's where the numbers are coming from. So in 2008, when the TMDL was established, there was about 7,000 kilograms of controllable nitrogen load to Little Pond. So that does not include the atmospheric deposition or the benthic flux. With the updated water use data, and this is all the water use, whether it's on septic or sewer, so 2021 to 2024, we saw about a 200 kilogram increase in nitrogen loading. So using that same methodology, the water use for all of the parcels that were sewered from Little Pond Sewer Service Area, that reduced about 5,200 kilograms. There are a couple of existing IAs within that watershed. So that brings us to our updated remaining attenuated load. So 1,900 kilograms, whereas the target threshold load for the watershed is 1,956. And that comes straight out of the TMDL, and that doesn't change. So if you're savvy, you can see that we're already there. So other things we've done and or looked at within Little Pond, and these are some of the types of implementations and methods and tools we're going to look at for the different watersheds. So in Little Pond, we have a small amount of oyster aquaculture. That's MES's stuff. It's just oysters, about 1/4 of an acre, so there's some potential credit from there. Little Pond, the Woodbriar Golf Course closed after the MEP was conducted, so all the fertilization from that golf course can be counted as a credit. I'm going to hold on the green line. The blue line, it comes from Chuck and Marine and Environmental Science, their proposed townwide aquaculture plan of what they think they could do in Little Pond. And then the last three, we've got our 25% fertilizer credit because we have a fertilizer bylaw. We have a 25% stormwater credit because we follow our NEPDES permit. And then atmospheric deposition is something we haven't considered as a town up to now, but there is good EPA data that basically says there's been a 41% reduction in atmospheric deposition in the last 20 years. And there are other papers that support that. So we have that listed as a 41% reduction of the deposition that was quoted in the MEP. So the green line, something we've talked about. Do you want to jump in on this?
Do you have, well, so why don't you just finish your table there?
Okay, so.
The bottom
Yep.
few lines there.
So the bottom, we have, again, our target threshold, which is the same as above, and if all of these other alternatives were considered, here's where our nitrogen load would be once all of this is implemented and or if it's all given credit for. This is kind of what that map looks like. So this is the Little Pond watershed. All the parcels in blue are sewer service area. The shellfish are all of these dark blue polygons. You can see that they're primarily focused around the inlet. But in this case, they're not even needed to count toward nitrogen credit anyway. So something we've looked at, we're starting to look at as far as IAs, is the potential for having them upstream from freshwater ponds. So Jones Pond, freshwater ponds that already have a USGS watershed delineation. So within Little Pond, Jones Pond, which is this one here, has its own watershed delineation, sub-watershed delineation through here. So these couple of parcels right here are upstream from Jones Pond. So this tiny little one that I don't even know who it is, doesn't have its own watershed.
Saul's Pond?
Is it?
Saul's Pond, I think
Okay.
is the little one there.
So those are the green parcels that are here. So if those were required a nitrogen-reducing septic system at 10 milligrams per liter, they would have a small impact in the nitrogen reduction credit.
I can just talk about that a
Sure.
little bit right now. So a big part of the watershed management plan overall for the 14 watersheds will be IA systems in the watersheds to each of the coastal ponds, each of the nitrogen-sensitive areas to our coastal ponds. This is the first one to show you, but we wanted to talk about, so the way that those IA areas would be implemented, we imagine, is through ultimately, it'd be an approved watershed plan, but then it would also be voted by the Board of Health. They have an existing now regulation for, that requires IA upgrades for new construction, and you are all very familiar with that. So they talked about additional IA areas. That Board of Health regulation could, in the end, include within these nitrogen-sensitive areas, we can include the upgradient properties abutting freshwater ponds. That would, because the estuaries project assumes attenuation of nitrogen going through a freshwater pond, we would only get 50% or less credit for that nitrogen removal towards meeting the TMDLs for coastal ponds. But it would be a potential benefit to the freshwater ponds. The advantages of this are, I hope, obvious. There is a great deal of interest in the water quality in freshwater ponds in town. And while we are implementing this project, we could require, we could sort of kill two birds with one stone by requiring those septic system IA upgrading of freshwater ponds. The disadvantage is potentially that the freshwater ponds are not regulated right now. There is not a state limit, like a TMDL for the freshwater ponds. So this is something the town would be doing based on the town's concern for freshwater ponds. We can also look at either requiring a phosphorus removal technology be included, upgrading of those freshwater ponds, or at least that in sort of the way the Board of Health has been allocating space for an IA, we could allocate space or a means of adding phosphorus removal in the future. So we just wanted to introduce this concept here and get some feedback on it. It doesn't have to be a part of the plans for the coastal ponds. If IAs are needed to meet TMDLs, then we can just focus on coastal ponds. But if we require them just universally on the upgradient side of all freshwater ponds, it could be doing some water quality, it could be achieving some water quality protection for freshwater ponds as well. One last thing was that Kristen mentioned watershed delineations. So I personally don't think it is worth spending an enormous amount of time trying to get the watershed to the coastal ponds perfectly identified and figure out exactly which property contributes the most and all that. We have sub-watershed delineations that were prepared by the United States Geologic Survey. Within the MEP reports and the TMDLs, they show watershed delineations, not just for the overall coastal pond, but to all of the sub-watersheds within those. So if it's in a coastal pond watershed, there are sub-watershed delineations for most, I guess I didn't realize, not for all of the freshwater ponds. So what we do is take the upgradient side of that delineation and just say all the abutting properties are going to be required to put in an IA system. And the suggestion is that that be just for now the abutting properties. The abutting properties stand to benefit the most from improvements in pond water quality are, because of the time of travel, have the highest impact on the coastal, on those freshwater ponds. So I think it's an idea for how to start on this concept. So I want to I guess I would suggest we let Kristen finish the presentation and we can talk about all of it at the end.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Step to the mic, Doug, just because it's TV, step to the microphone, thanks.
Can you just clarify for me the 1956 and the 1492, which is which? We still have that.
Columbus sailed in 1492.
Columbus sailed the ocean blue.
So the 1956 is where we stand right now after the Little Pond Sewer Project and after these couple of IAs that are already in the watershed. No, that's...
The target. 1956 is the target.
1956 is the target, I'm sorry. 1909 is where we stand right now.
Remaining target.
That's the line, that's the number we have to get to, not the remaining target. We don't have to get to zero.
Okay.
So 1909 is less than 1956, so we're already below the target.
Oh.
The 1492 is these other credits, the free credits that come because of the fertilizer bylaw, the shellfish that's there, and the atmospheric deposition. These are the alternatives that the state makes you have a contingency plan for if you're relying heavily on these. So if the shellfish get implemented and all of those credits, then we're down to 1492. So well below the target of 1956. So even better. So on the traditional approach, so that we're already there. But as I just mentioned, for every watershed plan that is going to rely any part on alternatives, the requirement for the watershed permit is to have a traditional backup plan. So the traditional technologies are sewering or the general use approval IAs, and all of those are 19. That's the best performance for those. So if you do the math the same way, now our oysters are set to zero, the fertilizer, the stormwater, and the atmospheric deposition are all zero, and I didn't even include the proposed shellfish to be included. And with the IAs that were on the map, the performance level goes from 10 to 19 now, so you can see it's an even smaller reduction. We were already achieving the target, so it just bumps us a little bit further along. And the plan doesn't change, you just don't see the shellfish boxes down here. So that's kind of what the tables will look like as we go forward. I'm not done yet, sit down. So something else I put in here, this is the updated long-term monitoring data from UMass Dartmouth School of Marine Science, School of Marine and Science Technology. I showed a version of this recently, but I just put in the 2025 data. So you can see we're still moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
Over here, it just makes a stronger statistical trend that we're going the right way. And then I also included, one of the key metrics is eelgrass, the restoration of eelgrass. So the DEP periodically does aerial eelgrass surveys. This is the data that's available through their GIS mapping. So it has the different years, and this is all colorimetric analysis. It does not comment or make any indication on the actual health of the eelgrass, just where it might be present. But you can see 1995 was the first year of the survey data that's available, how it has changed over time. 2019 was the year that the last connections were made, so we wouldn't expect to see any kind of response in eelgrass from sewering yet, and we don't have any more updated data from then. But if you prefer to see that in a graph form, that is what the eelgrass area acreage looks like.
Can I just say a couple of things going back through this?
Start at that end.
So, this is really nice to see the trend going down. Like the Little Pond concentration, the concentration of nitrogen in Little Pond at the Sentinel Station was lower again in 2025 than it had been in previous years. And it is approaching the threshold nitrogen concentration. The reason that that Kristen is talking about eelgrass is, as you're aware, the idea is that the concept is if you get to a certain nitrogen concentration, you will improve the habitat, improve the quality of the ecosystem in the pond. That is going to be very difficult to measure and to confirm over time. And looking at this data shows you how difficult that may be. That this is existing DEP data for eelgrass in a number of different years before the sewer was completed, and it varies enormously, at least using the data gathering method that they've been using. So we will watch this over time and see how it looks, but this is, it's just sort of a preview of this recovery as gauged by eelgrass is going to be a difficult thing to do. Certainly, recovery as looking at the water quality, the nitrogen concentrations is a much more clear-cut metric. And I just wanted to reiterate that the reason we're spending the time on this, the Little Pond is very different from the others in that we've done an enormous amount of work there already, and it's looking like we don't need to do any more. But this is the format that we would use for future watersheds as well.
Tom?
Yeah, I had a question for Amy, or perhaps Kristen knows. In the little green zone north of the pond there, how many residences or how many sources of?
How many parcels are green?
Yeah, are in the green zone.
There's 6. One of those is the Atria Golf Course that's now conservation.
Yeah.
And while that has no nitrogen load,
Right.
that's not counted in there because it's based on water use.
Right, because I was just thinking there wasn't much at all in that patch.
Right. So, but it's still identifying which parcels count as direct abutters upstream.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no, I see that. I just was trying to figure out if there was going to possibility of any growth or anything there, and I don't think so.
No, it's 300 committee land. It's pretty protected.
Yeah, yeah, I've walked, I think, just about all of that.
Okay, Sean? Steve?
Got 4 comments or questions. The first one, if you could go to the eelgrass map. This is a really nerdy question in a field I know absolutely nothing about. I'm hoping that Ken and Tom will jump in and explain it. If you look at those patterns of eelgrass starting in 1995, way back then, it was close to the shoreline, and then it suddenly, or not so suddenly, but in 16 years, no, 6 years.
6 years.
It jumps into the center where there was a hole before, and it stays there, and eventually at 2015 or 19 gets a little bigger. Does that have anything to do with nutrients coming from the shoreline, or does anybody know about that?
Can I just, I'm sorry, I'd like to just say, I think it has more to do with the methodology than with what's actually going on in the field. They're making these maps based on an aerial survey, and based on the color of what they see in the survey of the water, they're estimating what's eelgrass and what's not. So that's my take on it, is that if that's the methodology for the eelgrass, the estimate of where eelgrass is, it's better than nothing, but it is not.
So it's a different kind of eelgrass, or the observers had different kinds of color blindness, or what?
It's not a very obvious, it's not a clear, it's not clear where the eelgrass is. They're drawing a line based on what they see from the aerial survey, and it's not 100%. They could be looking, for example, they could be calling it eelgrass, but it could be another kind of algae growth, because it's darker in the aerial survey than it is, than the water to either side is. Anyway, I don't want to jump on the biologists who know a lot more, but I just wanted to say that
Well, that might be the answer. I mean, that's a good seg into my next question, or more comment. If there could be a timeline for all of these estuaries of all the major events, the planning, the implementation, and then the measurements, and when the contingency plan is required, that would help everybody to look at this intelligently.
That's part
Financial
of,
planners and everybody, and I think it should be a required graph in almost every presentation that comes close to this.
and that's part of the planning process of, you have to have, it's the 5-year phases for your updates, and at what point you decide your alternatives may or may not be working if you have to move to the contingency plan. So that will all get planned out over the course of that 20-year permit.
Okay, but I mean,
But we're not there yet.
But the numbers on when the contingency plan goes into effect is not something that you plan. That's a requirement from DEP.
It's you.
Otherwise, we'd choose 150 years.
The town sets at what trigger. So if you're monitoring IAs and they're all not making 10 milligram per liter performance because you have to monitor them, at what point do you expand that and say, okay, for 5 years, we're not making the target we thought we were going to with this number of IAs, we have to go into another phase. So the town needs to decide what those phases are going to be and where those triggers are.
But you agree that some of it comes from DEP. Otherwise, the town could, unless the DEP told us we couldn't do it, we'd choose 150 years.
We're going to put together a plan, and it will be presented to this group, and then once that is voted by the town or approved by the town, it'll go to the DEP, and they will approve it or not approve it based in their review. So,
They've not said anything about what their requirements are on
no,
how soon you have to meet the
no.
standards.
They want a contingency plan that is based on conventional technology, and they have not told you what the threshold is for employing that.
At this point, there's only a couple of watershed plans out there, and the 5-year cycles haven't run, so we don't yet see what DEP is going to do. But I would characterize it like this: as the plan comes together, somebody's going to say, we're going to sewer this area by this date. We're going to get so many IAs by this date, so many more IAs by this date, so many acres of aquaculture. And on a 5-year basis, somebody's going to come in and say, town's got to do this, and say, we thought we'd get 200 IAs in. We only got 100. We thought we'd sewer 10 miles. We only sewered 8. We thought we'd have aquaculture and we'd have this. We'll see what the DEP does, but it's not that we can ask for 150 years or something like that, Steve. We have to be very specific, 5, 10, 15, 20. The DEP is going to review the plan, and they're going to compare it to other communities. And they're going to say, why is Falmouth so far ahead or so far behind? I mean, if Mashpee's going to go appropriate, what'd you say, Ed? What did you say what the big plan is? How much? 100 million?
100 million.
100 million, 1,000 homes. DEP is going to look and say, Falmouth, why are you doing 500 homes and only putting 50 million in? You know, when
That's
that
the
plan comes
first
in.
stage, and I totally agree with what you just said, but I'm moving, including that, and moving past it to the stage where nature is in charge. We've installed everything on schedule, and now, like the graphs that Amy and Kristen showed, you're waiting for the plume of non-nitrogen to make its way, and you're waiting for the biology to change in the ponds to produce the eelgrass. So that doesn't happen instantly. So the amount of time that you allow for that is relevant, because if DEP says, sorry, it has to happen within so many years, and it doesn't, then it doesn't matter on Little Pond because they already have met the goal. But on the other ones, where we're counting on the contingency, the specialized removal techniques, it matters because we don't want to have to fall back on the contingency plan.
You had 4 questions. You've done 2.
Oh, okay. The last one, no, maybe I only have 3. I can't count today. This is the comment. I hope that the town moves to a policy where they have some financial skin in the game on IAs. Otherwise, I think they're being treated cavalierly. Oh, we'll put some IAs here and some IAs there. And for instance, you were mentioning the phosphorus removal in an area where, because it's in a freshwater pond, the nitrogen is only getting half credit, probably for a good reason, because it is being taken. It might be better to put the money, we haven't discussed phosphorus removal techniques, but suppose there are some phosphorus removal techniques that cost a certain amount of money that perhaps is even less expensive than nitrogen removal and doesn't require, it can be standalone, that doesn't have to be an adjunct to a nitrogen removal device. It would make more sense for the town as a whole to not make people put in gratuitous nitrogen removal in places where it's only doing 50% good, but put that same money into phosphorus removal. And as long as the town has no financial skin in the game on IAs, that's not going to be done rationally. Finished.
Okay. I have a couple of, I'm just going down here now.
Okay.
So one comment I'm going to provide is when the target number that came out of the MEP, the number 1956 or whatever it is, right? I think we as a community, as the town, should treat that as an MEP number. I don't believe there's any safety factor in that. They did their whatever, but, you know, Steve sort of alluded to how long does it take for an estuary to come back. I think it's always good, you know, and I don't know, Amy, if you want to try to incorporate this to your plan somehow, but incorporate some type of safety factor that maybe we should be targeting to get to, you know, 80% or 90% of the TMDL rather than just get to the TMDL, because it's just a number, and it may or may not get us to where we go to. That's my first comment. And the second comment I have, I'm not asking you to comment to that, I'm just asking you to consider, you know, make this a plan. I want this to be a plan for Falmouth, not a plan for the DEP. I want this to be a plan for Falmouth. So when you were concerned about should you or should you not be incorporating pond issues in a watershed. I would say these are Falmouth's watershed plans for how to create a viable environment for our freshwater and our saltwater ponds, not bifurcate them or whatever. So to the extent that we are writing a plan, it doesn't have to just meet the minimum requirements of DEP. It should be a plan that gets Falmouth to a place where we know our systems are robust, we know our ponds are protected, and we know that the things are there. So I wouldn't try to narrow down what we're trying to do. That's my big picture on this one.
Can I just respond real quick? I appreciate that comment. I just want a clarification, though. I think what you said, I think, gives the opposite impression of what you intend, which is you said that you don't think the TMDL number, that threshold number, includes a safety factor. And I think you mean the opposite, right? That the MEP and TMDL process includes a lot of safety factors. And it's very conservative, and it's making us do quite a bit of work. You're saying maybe don't get all the way to the TMDL? No, I'm saying if, we got a little pond here. At the bottom there, it shows 1492 against 1956. Yep.
That's great, because we've got a plan for this watershed that doesn't just get to the TMDL quote number. It drives it below that number if we do everything that we're going to do, which obviously makes for a better system. So I'm just saying, you're going to have a couple of challenges as you look at other watersheds getting to the numbers. Don't be afraid to say, whatever 90% of 1956 might be. I don't have my calculator with me, but.
Right, so some of these watersheds, like Great Pond and Wacoit, it's going to take several phases of work and a lot of money. And so we will not be getting to the TMDL for Great Pond, with that TMDL number, this threshold number for Great Pond for within the 20-year watershed permit timeline, I don't believe. So we're not going to be getting to that contingency plan for quite a while for Great Pond, just because of the amount of work that has to be done there. So there will be phases of implementation for Great Pond and Wacoit in particular, and that will extend over a larger time period.
I'm not being argumentative, but I would just say that, to the extent that we focus on meeting a TMDL,
Yep.
and that when we get to the TMDL, through numerical numbers of measurements, we don't see an improvement in water quality, it's going to be a tough explanation.
Okay.
Okay? You're up, Ed. Sorry.
Okay. This gets into the crux of how do you measure success? And there's one measure, the Sentinel Station, and that's, the state said, you shall meet that. One of the things that bothers me is, looking at these ponds, well, the water comes in and it goes out. I think some good solid data as what is the nitrogen concentration in the sound that is feeding and receiving from these ponds is important, because if the threshold number we're trying to achieve is unreachable because the water in the sound has more nitrogen than we're trying to get to, wow. So I think we need that data.
We do have that. So the water in the sound is less than 0.3 milligrams per liter.
Okay. 'Cause I know
there is an awful lot of data on the water quality in sound.
I know there seemed to have been some debate on what that concentration was as the outfall studies were being made. So,
Right.
Okay, so it is feasible. The other thing is, the measures of success are very limited. The Sentinel Station and some vague idea of eelgrass, which is not well defined and hard to measure unless you, again, go down with a submersible and cameras like they did out for the outfall studies. Other measures that should be considered, and I think show health of the estuary, and that's what we're trying to get to. Not just some magic number that came up from the MEP study, but what's healthy? And Little Pond is a great case in point. The
So-
water, you wanted to,
Nope, go ahead.
oh, okay, I thought you wanted to.
I thought you were done.
No, 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 you know me, I ran the lawn. You know, about 4 to 6 weeks ago, I was walking the bike path by Eel Pond where APCC wants to replace the culvert, and there was huge mats of algae 6 weeks ago. And I thought, oh my God, when I walk by Little Pond, it's going to be covered because there's an outbreak around town. It was clean. Little Pond had nothing, zero, even in the little coves. And I thought, this is incredible, because usually if it was going on in Eel Pond over on the bike path, Little Pond was in trouble too. It's gone. The mats that used to cover the pond several times a year, I haven't seen. The water's clear. You can stand on the bridge at the outflow and see the water coming in, and when it comes back out, it's crystal clear. It's the same level of clarity. The plant life, the fish, the shellfish are back. People are swimming in the pond, yet none of that counts because those aren't measured. So I think, you know, we should have, even if the state doesn't, what's the pre-existing condition before we start our remediation? And that's what's going on in Perch Pond with the data Steve mentioned and the grant that Kristen and Ken were working on and got, so that we're measuring what it is now. So we can see what it is, we can look at what is the clarity, are there shellfish, are there any fish, are there fish kills? None of that is in the MEP thing, but if you look at the Truro plan, which they have submitted, and it's one of the very few that have submitted and is under review, and I think the public comment period ends May 8th, it's going to be very interesting to see what the DEP says about the Truro wastewater plan for their estuaries, because some of their estuaries don't have TMDLs, and yet they're making steps to address that. So stay tuned. This whole process is evolving, but I think it's important that we look at overall health measures beyond eelgrass and a nitrogen at a sentinel station.
So the state does have guidance for water quality standards, and that's what designates or allows watersheds and estuaries to get on the integrated list of waters, so the 303D list. There are defined uses for each of the watersheds, water bodies, whether it's shellfish, recreation, all of these things. All of Falmouth's coastal ponds, all of the NSAs are classified as Class SA surface waters, so the highest class. So for things like chlorophyll and dissolved oxygen, there are metrics in there that says that use is being maintained. So for instance, chlorophyll levels have to consistently be below 5 micrograms per liter. Dissolved oxygen, you can only have so many anoxic events in certain periods. So there's whole criteria there, and SMAS monitors those criteria when they do their grab samples. Buzzards Bay Coalition does as well. So we have a lot of data sets on these other parameters. So the end goal, besides overarching, it's you want eelgrass and the habitat to come back. If there's no eelgrass there, it's your benthic communities. But the end goal is to get off of the impaired water list. And that's a process through the state, through that 303D list. And there's all kinds of data submission for that to back up everything that you just said.
Ken?
So I completely agree with Amy on the fact that the eelgrass metric is pretty challenging to meet. I don't think it's necessarily measurement error. I think there are a lot of factors that affect the success of eelgrass. Physical disturbance, predation. It turns out predation by green crabs is a big factor. People have tried in West Falmouth Harbor to recolonize portions of the harbor, and the green crabs destroy the chutes before they can take hold. Climate change, temperature tolerance. So, you know, certainly the data you've showed from the on total nitrogen at the Sentinel station is indicating that there's a response there, and the data we've collected on groundwater showed an even earlier response in terms of reductions in the inputs. And that's kind of what you would expect. The inputs would go down, there'd be some benthic recycling, so maybe you wouldn't see the reductions in the surface water right away, but over time, they would take hold. And what it's looking like, based on that total nitrogen data, is that we would reach the threshold within the next, 3 to 5 years, I would say. So from the time we started sewering, 2017 or so, everything was online, to maybe 27, 28, let's see, maybe 29, maybe a dozen years is sort of the recovery period for the Little Pond system to meet that threshold. You think that's a reasonable conclusion?
Based on what we're seeing, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing that I was very gratified by when we made our groundwater measurements and then looked at, okay, here's the concentration in the groundwater, and if the recharge is, roughly what we think it is, multiply that number times the concentration to get the inputs, the loading estimates agreed pretty well with the MEP modeling estimates based on land use. So it was two separate, totally independent ways of getting loading, and they agreed. The only thing that you mentioned that I'm a little concerned about was the possibility of doing a more extensive oyster aquaculture at the southern end of the pond, because that's exactly where all of that eelgrass is currently flourishing. And I think again, disturbance, shading by cages, those might be detrimental to those eelgrass beds. And I'm not sure that the additional nitrogen removal is going to, be important enough to jeopardize the health of the eelgrass beds.
So the shellfish surveys that MES did wasn't only for nitrogen. That was also for cohogs, for commercial guys, private, recreational. He was identifying areas where it could be feasible. So a couple of years ago, he came and made the presentation, which had all of the polygons, which they found where there could be areas suitable, whether it be bottom cages, floating oyster gear, scallops. And they have basically a rubric for different factors, whether it's going to support, municipal, private, nitrogen reduction. So where are the priorities for that? And as they move further, they haven't begun permitting yet. I'm sure all of that input makes a difference. So, but these were just the areas that were identified.
Right, but that's a very significant area. In fact, I would say it covers more than half the existing eelgrass bed there. And if you've got people tromping out there collecting shellfish, putting in cages, et cetera, I think that's going to have a negative effect. I mean, one of the reasons I think the eelgrass is doing as well as it is in Little Pond is there's no boats. So there's no propellers, no prop wash, nothing churning up the sediment.
No anchors.
No anchors. But we see phenomenal growth. And I mean, a couple of years ago, there were something like 40 swans in the pond grazing on that eelgrass. They were having an impact for sure.
Okay,
Yep.
Quick question.
go ahead, Steve.
What is your plan to finish the plans? By what date? By what date will you have the last of them to this stage?
When they get done.
End of the year. End of the year.
The watershed,
That's the hope.
the watershed management plan is the schedule for that project is to complete it this year. So we
You
will,
mean 2026?
correct.
Oh, somebody said it was this summer.
No,
No, it's always been end of the
no,
year.
it's this year.
I'm glad I asked.
Right. I'm going to let the audience, if they have comments or questions on I'd like people to stay on the presentation and not diverge into their own little issues. Go ahead, Matt.
Kristen, can you go back to the map that showed the different sections? So those areas in the blue, are those a true representation of every parcel that was sewered? And so how were those parcels selected to be sewered? Because on that map, you have like some parcels, like it's half a parcel, it's not a full parcel. But you sewer, so that was sewered.
Huh?
So if you look on the map here, like this parcel here is like cut in half. So we sewered that section?
Yeah.
Because
So
it was
the lower
half.
watershed to Little Pond.
Yeah.
So the goal was to sewer everything that was in the lower watershed to Little Pond and meet the TMDL.
Matt, I think it's just a case of the way the mapping's created. The parcel is in the sewer area. The parcel may extend over the watershed.
Well, my
Okay.
question is I wanted to know that for Clara. So the Austria parcel is in this watershed.
Right.
And that's a large nitrogen contributor to that watershed. Do they have a wastewater discharge permit?
Yes, they have a groundwater discharge permit for a ruck system that's low nitrogen.
And why isn't that included in this permit, in her presentation? Those numbers should be included in that. It's in this watershed.
So the actual Atria Woodbriar?
Yeah, their nitrogen that's removed from this watershed
It's a
should be in this
split
presentation.
parcel, and the MEP designated which watershed. It actually, by the MEP model, loads into Inner Harbor.
Yep,
And what about Cohasset Inn?
Inner Harbor,
Because that's also in here.
Inner
I think
Harbor,
that's also Inner Harbor.
Inner Harbor.
But do they have a wastewater discharge permit?
Coonamessett does not. Atria does. They have a,
So
they have 10.
they're contributing nitrogen to this
And that all,
watershed.
that
No,
all-
not to this watershed, to the Inner Harbor.
Well, I'm saying
Coonamessett and
it's
Atria. Coonamessett-
contributing in that watershed.
No, not this watershed. The Little Pond watershed does not receive the septic effluent from Atria or the Coonamessett Inn. They do not. The effluent from both of those facilities flows to Inner Harbor.
She's showing a tiny percentage of a lot that is, or a small percentage of a lot that's in this watershed.
Right.
It's accounted, sorry. What Kristen said is it's accounted for overall.
Right.
But it's not accounted for in this system because most of the parcel is in Inner Harbor.
Well, that's
Do
why
you-
I asked that question.
Do you look at the
Clarification
actual-
before I asked my bigger question was, how do you decide the
The
parcel?
MEP decided.
The MEP
And we're
decided.
following the MEP designation, so if they said Atrios parcel loaded into Inner Harbor when they developed the TMDL, that's what we're following. So we're keeping our removals and updates consistent between watersheds for those split parcels.
But I'm confused because Morse Pond parcel is obviously our public school. You can't tell me that parcel is discharging into this watershed when it's on the edge of the other watershed.
So that might not actually be contributing to Little Pond, it's just showing up in the outline and it's a sewered parcel. So that might not be counting in that total. I'd have to look at the actual parcel. All I'm showing here is where the watershed line is and what parcels are physically sewered.
Okay.
So, because if the sewer ran in front of it, it had to connect.
So the adjoining watershed would have the Atria and the Cohasset Inn included in that? Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
Yep.
If they look at the actual location of the leach field.
Hilda Menge, Precinct 8. At what point, besides a meeting like this, will the public have any influence or participation in the creation of these plans?
There will be public meetings. This is there will be public meetings as part of this process. We don't have a schedule right now because we don't have the materials yet, but there will certainly be public input solicited on all of these plans.
So my concern is that usually these public meetings happen when most of the plans are done. I would like to see public input when the plan is being developed, so we can have an input on the development of the plan, not at the end where there's a hearing, we get 2 minutes to talk about it, and that's it. And that's our experience from many of these big projects, and we would like to have an input right this minute. As you decide, you say, you're here now, just explain to the public, this is where we are, get input, and then the next phase, maybe months later. Not in September when you're almost done. It just doesn't help the transparency for the public. That's my request and hope that that will happen with this project.
Okay. I'll just say you're here now, and these meetings are public, and these are announced on the water quality, as a part of the water quality agenda. Not all of the public wants to attend a meeting at every stage. So we're trying to strike a balance between offering the public information when we have a draft available that we have completed and is ready for feedback, versus inviting people. Most of the public is not going to want to attend a meeting every month until this is done.
But some of the public would.
And they can come to these meetings.
No, this is not good enough for that. It should be in a school, it should be in a place where people feel comfortable, where they feel like it's their community. And I think that's really, really important. And I'm really concerned that we will get it again. We'll hear it when you have your draft together. I want to be part of making that plan. And I know a lot of other people want to do that too. And that might not be thousands, but anybody who's at least accepted in that role for the public, because right now it's just, I feel it's behind closed doors. Whatever happens, then we get this, but this is not what I call generally a public meeting. That's not what I refer to.
Hildy, can I ask you to be more specific? So we are scheduled to regularly get updates on the watershed planning here with water quality as a public forum. From what you just heard about Little Pond, what do you feel is not included?
It's not that the presentation doesn't include everything, it's how the public feels that they're part of the plan. It's presented, so now you're already making a draft, but we are not part of putting our inputs into that draft at all.
I'm challenging you here.
Okay.
This is a public forum. We brought the first watershed that the consultants have worked on and presented where they're at to solicit public input on this watershed and this plan. You're saying you want to be able to provide input to the plan, and it's in front of you now. Little Pond watershed is in front of you tonight. If you think there is something not in this watershed plan that the consultant and the town should be dealing with, tell us. Tell us, because we're going to come back with the next one and the next one. We're going to have 14 of these.
I know.
Okay, they're not.
I see it now.
I take a little bit of offense to you thinking that things are being done in the dark. People go off and work on something, and then they bring it to this meeting to make a presentation. This is the first one we have. It's a presentation of the Little Pond watershed.
Right.
You're saying that this is not acceptable.
No.
You're saying this is not acceptable, and I want to know, why is this not acceptable? What should we be doing with the Little Shed watershed plan to make it acceptable for the public?
Well, this is the first time this is kind of what I see now, so now I have to do my homework and then kind of think it all through. But it would be nice if any of your meetings, people could sit in there and kind of understand how you make your plan, what is included in the plan, at what point.
So you're asking to go sit in Kristen's living room while she's on a computer putting together the watershed plans. That's what you're asking for. You're asking for the public to be available. Kristen's making these things up. She's been working on them for 2 years. I feel we've been very public about this all the way along. And you're telling me we're not being public, we're not including the public, and I'm asking you, what about this plan? You know, should we get a signboard put up on like Gifford Street that says Water Quality Management Committee is going to talk about Little Pond watershed plan? What should we be doing?
Well, right now, that was a lot of information for me to digest and respond to and come up with, say, oh, you should be doing that. That's impossible for me to do. So I thought if we had a little bit more open discussion.
So the next one we get, we will not come to this public meeting. I guess I will send it to everybody that's on the, there's probably like 50 names on the distribution list for this Water Quality Management Committee. You get the agenda.
Oh, yeah.
So what you're asking is that we send this out to you. How many weeks ahead of time do you need it? How many weeks ahead of time? I'm not trying to accommodate you.
I'm not trying to make you upset.
No, I'm not upset. I'm trying to accommodate you. I'm trying to accommodate you.
I will try
How many weeks ahead of time would you have liked to have seen this?
I would like to be part of it. And so I'm just asking you to, right now, if you ask anybody on the street or anybody what is going on with the watershed plan, they have no clue. So I would like to have a better way to have more people involved in the planning part. And I mean, now I'm learning things, but I didn't know it earlier. And it's a lot of information. So I'm just asking for more transparency and more, have a meeting in a school and tell people we are working on these plans right now and we are including this much PRB and this much acreage, and have people be able to respond to it and think about it. Right now, I can talk to many, many people. Nobody has a clue what's going on.
Okay.
And I would wish there was a way to make that better.
Okay. Earl?
I got a question. I would like to answer the question you asked for Hilda, because I can answer that question.
You got to go to the microphone.
So you asked Hilda, in what way is the public not being included? Can you tell me this green line that has been added? Because I've been through this permitting process the last 2 years. This new green line and this new policy of doing IA septic systems north of the ponds, when was that discussed?
That was brought up tonight for consideration as a discussion item. And you've given some feedback, and we're listening to you.
Also, was the Freshwater Ponds Committee and the Board of Health involved in, or at least notified of this idea to get their input? Because this does include the freshwater ponds and rivers, and with the Board of Health decision to be involved in water quality, they would also you'd have to have a joint meeting of the Board of Health, Water Quality Management Committee, and the Freshwater Committee. So this new tactic can be publicly discussed, because the public might say,
Matt, I agree with you. We will not bring another watershed plan forward without scheduling it as a joint meeting of the Board of Health and the Pond Committee and this committee. We will make sure that the information is available. How many weeks ahead of time do you want it? You didn't give me an answer. 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 months? We can issue the next watershed plan out to people that are on the distribution list, and then arrange a meeting of a massive meeting of the entire 3 committees that have interaction on it. We can do that if that's what people would like, if that's what you're asking for.
So you answered this specific question. Hilda and myself are not trying to be confrontational. We're just posing our view about that a new policy is being presented tonight that has had no public comment and no comment from the Freshwater Committee and no comment from the Board of Health. If this is even, the Board of Health and the Freshwater Committee might say, let's do all the parcels that touch a pond.
I'm not going to argue with you. I'm calling on George, but I'm also going to point out that we have a guest here who's traveled for agenda item 3. I want to move him up and get him to speak. Doctor?
George Topoulos, Precinct 3, and also on the Board of Health. And I report with some sadness that I've been asked to come to all of these meetings by the Board of Health.
Can I bring a bucket of crocodile tears, George, over for you?
And George, we have somebody from our committee that comes to your committee, and there's somebody from the pond committee that comes here.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
Apparently,
No,
what
it's
we
a
need
good
to have is
idea. I just wish
apparently we
it
need to have
was
the entire
somebody else,
committees
but-
here. to do
Yeah,
this.
no, I agree. I agree. And I think a thing that is different about this that maybe this has already been implemented. I think this is the only one that's already been implemented of any. And so this is a report not on what should we do. It's what did we do, 10 years ago? And how's it going? So I don't have any problem with that. But I do have a couple of questions. If on the slide with the graphs, yeah. And I don't know if this is what Steve Layton was referring to before, but it would be great if on these graphs there were two other lines. How many parcels, households, whatever, have actually connected to the sewer at different points in time, and how many IAs have gone in at different points in time. And that would help to think about
That's a good idea, George, and it's yours. It's not what I was thinking.
Okay. And the other thing, are there other localities from which good estimates can be made of the time constant for changes in the actual water and the fish and the eelgrass after things sewers or IAs have been done?
The best example I can give you is Boston Harbor. In 1999, they cut off all of the discharges to the inner harbor, and within 15 years, Boston Harbor was fundamentally cleaned up.
Yeah.
So I'll defer to Ken, but it's an 8 to 15 year cycle.
But that's fundamentally different because that was a direct discharge. You're not talking about, there was no groundwater component.
But it's
Okay,
something.
it's a bad example, Steve. I'm sorry I brought it up.
And the other thing was, the Little Pond sewers were mostly connected in 2017, is that correct?
19.
19.
16 to 2018, all of them were done by.
Right.
And they started in 16. Thank you.
I can show these.
Yeah, there's graphs that show that.
Okay.
The response for ponds is going to be pond-specific. All the ponds are different. They have different flushing rates, different amounts of groundwater coming in. They're all going to be different.
And different size watersheds with different travel times. Absolutely.
I want to get a motion to go to agenda item 3.
So moved.
Okay, all those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Yes.
No, I'm sorry. 4, number 4. I want to jump to number 4. Because we have Bruce who's traveled all the way here to present a financial tool, and I want to make sure he gets on. And Maggie, hopefully we have a little bit of time at the end, and you can provide a little summary on the Quashnet. Thank you.
Let's see if this is going to come up the way we want it. You should introduce this guy.
Yeah, I'm going to.
See that?
Yeah, Bruce, you want to give a little bit of your CV? So I mean, some of us know you, but not all of us.
Sure, but first of all, thank you very much for providing the opportunity for a conversation about something we've been working on for a while. I'm Bruce Walden.
Bruce?
I'm not an engineer.
Bruce, could I interrupt for a minute?
Yeah.
Stay close to the mic.
Got it. I'm a third-generation Cape owner in the West Hyannisport, Centerville area. I live in Needham, and my career started with IBM doing system sales when the world was going from centralized to decentralized. So there's some parallels that I find coming up here. Then I got into executive recruiting, and there was an EPA lady who used to sell with me at IBM who developed the concept of water technology clusters and put one successfully into Cincinnati, a whole ecosystem of labs, financing, engineers, whatever, vendors. And she was told, okay, now it's time to go fix the water quality problems on Cape Cod, Buzzards Bay, and Narragansett Bay. She moved to Needham. We reacquainted and commuted into the city together for a few years, and I realized that I want my kids to have good water. And we're not in the Centerville watershed, but we're very close to it. And I got involved with her efforts and created an organization called the New England Water Innovation Network, which is to try and get innovative companies, particularly small companies, into the water industry to help solve problems on the basis that more cement wasn't going to fix it. And we ended up losing some funding a number of years ago and merged into NEWIA, the New England Water Environment Association, which is the wastewater professional association for all of New England. And we started expanding into, well, we had expanded into Long Island area because they have the exact same problems that we have. They have 310,000 cesspools on Long Island. They were late in starting. They have a very different governance structure. They have a very strong county. Cape Cod has home rule, which makes things a lot more complicated. We have 15 different decision processes that we have to manage through. In any event, I had written an article trying to get my arms around what was going on with the new technology of nitrogen-removing septic systems, and caught EPA's attention. I needed a place to post it. NEWIA kindly said, why don't you put it up on our website, and we were then made into a task force to try and help accelerate into the market a new generation of nitrogen-removing septic systems. We now have a website. I've got cards. Anybody wants to get on it. We have over 80 links of stuff that we've done and stuff that other people have done, and we look at it as a self-education website. That's my background. I'm a retired executive recruiter. Turns out that my mailing list is about 500 strong, so recruiting actually helped train me to be somewhat effective in this space, but I'm not an engineer. I look at things more from the financial side, where I have some experience and training. So is that enough context? Or more than enough, perhaps. But again, thank you for inviting me here. So the question that 2 or 3 years ago, our task force, which now includes about 40 people, including the half a dozen vendors that are looking at this marketplace to try and get into it, perhaps, said the biggest problem we have is there's no good information about cost data, particularly as comparing nitrogen-removing septic systems, which I'm going to call NRs, to sewering. And it took me about 8 or 9 months to go through a process primarily based on data from Barnstable, which has a very good website. I'm a resident there. I got to know some of the folks. And I put together a cost comparison, and we'll see a little bit of that in this presentation, to say, how do we think about this? Because there are going to be different mixes in different towns. Barnstable started out saying, we're going to do it all by sewering, and if we can prove that these NRs work, then we'll go back and get credit later. I'm very heartened to see Falmouth is embracing the new technology more quickly as part of the plan, and taking a page out of the IBM world. Back when we were looking at going from mainframes to just, personal computers and mini computers, the key, GE Water, which was one of the top guys there at the time, said, look, we don't know which is going to be the right solution for GE Water. We've got to invest in a bunch of different technologies and think about various technologies in a portfolio mindset. Because in 10 years, what we think now is going to be the winner may not be the best solution. So I think there are real parallels between how you think about technology in the water world as well as in the computer world. So the question really is, go back to 2015, how much is this going to cost? And what are the various mixes that we might think about in ours and sewering? I've never seen a model that includes both inflation and financing, so this is breaking some new ground there. And while it was originally designed for towns to study, I'm finding that the audience for this is a little broader than that. I'll come to that in a minute. But based on an original presentation I made to, for instance, to Barnstable, I said, well, we do everything by watershed. So we put in a watershed capability line item on the model. And it's, the audience is originally focused on towns. I'm waiting to schedule a meeting to show this to Gary Moran and others interested at DP. You've got the funding agencies. There's some curveballs that have been thrown out in the market. Wellfleet got a hybrid plan approved for SRF funding, and then 2 years later they pulled the SRF funding and said, no, you can't, no, you got to go over here to get the money, and this doesn't come with forgiveness. So that put a whole monkey wrench in that plan. I think the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund.
Cape and Island Trust Fund.
Trust Fund could find this useful. When you look at the numbers in total, I don't think there's enough money in the state or in the EPA to solve the problem. Companies like BlackRock are now looking at water infrastructure investing as a $600 billion opportunity. We're going to have to get in front of audiences like that to ultimately solve the financing problems we've got. That's the public-private partnership concept there. The other thing is, nobody's ever done a market study that says, how big is this market for the vendors? We'll talk about it later, but except for Clean 2 and Lombardo, nobody's putting any investment into Massachusetts because it takes them over $1 million and 10 years to get a new technology permitted. So they're all driving to Long Island. They started behind us. They now have 7,400 NRs installed. And to a question earlier this evening, I asked Walt DeWittiak, who's now with Stony Brook, and had been the chief engineer in the health department down there in Suffolk County. With that number installed, out of 300+ thousand cesspools, are you seeing anything? Or when do you expect to see something? Said, we're really probably talking 20 to 30 years before we're really going to see significant results. So the fact that some things have already shown here, I think is great. But there's going to be a lot of faith and time goes by before. It's taken 50 years to get here. It's going to take a long time to get out of the problem. When I look at the problem, I think of 4 key drivers. There's performance, cost, they're in blue because that's what this model really focuses on, but it's just as important to think about time value and location value. Time to travel has been discussed a little bit tonight. Where do you put it to have the most impact the quickest? And those are the softer, perhaps, issues that go along with what is the best technology or the right technology for a particular setting. We're focused on performance and cost here. And when we started putting this together, by the way, the background here is the Nature Conservancy, which funded the RME at Mass TC with its first $100,000, 2-3 years ago, felt that the best way they could support what was going on was to help the towns do their financial planning, because there's going to be a lot of money that needs to be raised. We started looking at it granularly about who's paying for what, and it just gets into a hairball very fast. So in my study 2 years ago and in this model, we're really looking at what's total cost. Who pays for what is a political discussion. We're not going to go into the politics. We're just going to try and identify the full ball of wax. And the approach that we've been taking is to look at load and load reduction, and starting with the housing stock in any given geography. and you'll see that as we go. I'm introducing the model. I will shift and show you an actual run-through of the model, but it's pretty dense and not good for presentation. Disclaimers, the Nature Conservancy asked me to make sure that everybody knows this is still in beta level, which means we think we've got something that's usable. There's documentation, there's proof of concept stuff that still is being done. We're still tweaking it, pressure testing it to find make sure it's doing the right things. And it is a high-level tool. It is not a detailed budgeting tool. I like to talk about things being precisely wrong, but generally right, and that's our objective. Scott Horsley, who I think has addressed this in the past, this group, quotes other folks saying all models are wrong, some are useful. Hopefully, this may be useful. Getting to the variables of the model, in the dark blue are the numbers that I'm going to show you when I demonstrate it. But from a project timeline, 20 years lines up with the new regs the DEP published 2 years ago. Financing, looking at things generally over 30 years. Cost of capital, this is a limitation of release one of the model, at least. Both town and homeowners are treated the same in terms of financing costs. Inflation, every one of these variables, people have different perspectives and will debate. The whole point is, let's create an environment where you can pick whatever you feel comfortable with and then see what it tells you at the end of the day. For instance, discount rate, Wellfleet just did an 80-year peer review of the work that GHD and Scott Horsley had done for their hybrid plan, centralized clusters and NRs, and they used a 3% discount rate. So choose your poison. And by the way, that found out that contrary to some questions in ether and comments in the ether, with that approach, and it's probably this tightly done and as comprehensive approach as anybody's going to need to do, EIA or NRs still are cheaper than sewering over the course. They don't do everything that sewering does, but they don't create some of the problems that sewering does. So, but it's a viable economic approach. Looking back over the last decade, the overarching comment I've heard is that the total Cape needs to reduce its load by about 55%. So that's what we're using, for demonstrating the model. So from a performance perspective, influent, I've used multiple numbers, but the number of towns that I've seen seem to look at 130 GPD, which is less than you might expect, but you have to take account of seasonality. And I think that's the prime driver for that. And if I'm wrong, I know somebody will correct me. Concentration, the 40 milligrams I used was from Brian Baumgartel's suggestion, taking the 26.25, which is at the edge of the property, and moving that back up to what's coming out of the house, 35%. In recent stuff I've seen, I think, including from Falmouth, 35 might be a better number, but Brian said, why don't you use 40? So that's what I've got here. And in terms of sewer and wastewater treatment plant effluent, most are operating today in the 6 to 10 range, as I understand it, but investments are being made to drive it to 3.
Yeah, and benchmark Falmouth, right? Falmouth is 3 or less.
Great. I know Barnstable's looking at something like $109 million to get to 3. So that's our target for comparative purposes. And EIA or NR effluent, the regs now are targeting 10. I know that vendors that are chasing this, they don't have all that DEP wants yet in terms of data, but they're looking at 5 or better. And whether it's Clean 2 directly doing it or other companies putting polishing pots after their process to get from 11 or 12 they're looking, and there's confidence down in Long Island that, at Stony Brook, that the market's going to get down in the 5 or better range. Maybe that's 2, 3, 4 years out. The question is, how long is it going to take to get permitted at those levels? But it can have a big impact on what it's going to cost the town to actually implement. The two biggest issues, or what do you say it's going to cost for an NR versus sewering a home? And I spent about 9 months putting that cost study together. I've got a copy if anybody wants to see it. It's also posted on our website. But there's some huge assumptions built into that approach. And so I'm going to just take an aside here and identify at least the buckets that went into coming up with those two numbers. The collection system, wastewater treatment plant, the connection to the home, and soft costs, which can be 35+% of construction costs. When you get through the process we did, and this was all data that was on the Barnstable website, and I reviewed it with Mark Milne, who was the CFO there, came out a little over $100,000 a home, including, and this is a big assumption, about $50,000 per home for the collection system, and that is a total swag. Anecdotally, we were hearing numbers from 80 to 120. I would tell you that Barnstable DPW didn't agree with my numbers when I presented that to them. But interestingly, perhaps last summer, I overheard a conversation where they were using the 100,000 number. So that makes me feel good. Long Island, I'm trying to get current numbers from them. It's somewhere north of 100, maybe 120, 140. But in some parts of Southampton, for instance, the numbers are even higher than that. So I'm hoping to get more information. I've already got the query out to Long Island for that. An important point is this concept of equitable treatment. Barnstable, and we coined a phrase, subsidize to equalize. The first point of that is that in order to do a hookup, Barnstable limits the homeowner to about a $20,000 total cost. There's a $10,000 neighborhood infrastructure charge, which can be financed through the town, and then the homeowner is responsible for connecting his or her house to the sewer. When I looked at what it meant in my house, I have to redirect all the soil pipes so they came out of the proper side of the house to go straight to the sewer when I hopefully get there. But that issue of how much is subsidized, I think, is a hugely important question. We'll talk a little bit more about that. For NRs, there's an extra bucket. You've got design permit, equipment, and the installation process. I include a charge for the RME because this is such a huge challenge for the homeowner to navigate that they need help. And that was part of the original RME concept that at that we helped Mass TC on. The front end is not part of what the town seemed to be interested in, but I think it's important. Installation, and there again, a lot of assumptions in here. In Shubal Pond, which is, I assume you're all familiar with, 60% of the homes that they upgraded could use part of the existing infrastructure. They didn't have to do a total replace. And that's what the retrofit number is. Taking that weighted average, it came out to a little under $50,000 per home. So keep the number simple, we assume 50. Anecdotally, we're hearing, 45 to 65. There's a study that Scott did up in Wellfleet where they took 5 bids, $40,000 to $80,000.
Yep.
Depends on, the market will have its own say here. I asked Walter Widiak what they're finding down on Long Island. They're saying on the west side of Suffolk County, he's surprised at how much we came up with, the value of our thing, and he said it's in the 30s. I attribute that, and we didn't talk about it, but I attribute that to just volume pricing and a lot going on. We're still at onesies and twosies, and we don't have the infrastructure for installing them. That's part of the challenge. But the key point about equitable treatment is that the homeowner pays the whole freight. And I think that is, if that's the approach, I think that's a huge risk factor for getting the voters to accept what you're doing. It doesn't have to be, I'm pontificating here, forgive me, it doesn't have to be dollar for dollar, but if you're not recognizing, why should he be limited to 20,000 and I got to pay 50? That's going to be a problem with the voters if it's not addressed. One of the, and am I getting to the kind of level you all are looking for out of this?
All good.
Is this useful for you?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. OM&M, operations, maintenance, and monitoring. One of the comments that's in the ether is that they're cheaper to put in to begin with, but they'll overwhelm in cost over the long haul. And that's where this 80-year present value or net present value study in Wellfleet, and it's public, it's posted, I can get anybody the report on it. It's being modified and polished, but the initial report was put out in February. Going to the study that I did 2 years ago, it looked like and here's an important point. There's a database about what it costs to, or what do the towns charge. The point is that the database that everybody goes to talks about what are the bills that are sent out to the public, not what does it cost the town. And looking at the Barnstable numbers, it looked like sewering came out more like $1,100 a year. Anecdotally, when we did that and talked to people, it was more like $1,200 to $1,500 per year. And ours, including monitoring or sampling, seemed to come out at about a little under $1,000. And we were challenged saying, well, that doesn't include replacement costs. So over a 20-year, we did a replacement cost addition. Comes out to $1,200. That is essentially a wash, in my view. And it may not be financed so much by the town. There'll be some financing, but we just said, that's a wash. The model's complex enough, we don't need to go there. I got a report yesterday that Long Island, without sampling or replacement costs, it costs them, they find about $500 a year. And Barnstable, 2 years ago, was charging about $460 per year. So that's a whole different set of conversations. But even with OM&M, if I go back here a minute, you can see that there is some subsidy. If they're charging $460 and it's costing $1,100, there's $600 and change of subsidy per year to keep the cost to the homeowner at a reasonable level. And that has to be understood, I think, and considered. Going to the model, there's sort of 4 steps in executing the model. One is, what geography are we talking about? I've modeled the whole Cape, which is more than just the nitrogen-sensitive areas, but that we're using publicly available data. What is the sewer carry load that you want? Simple way to ask that question is, what percentage of this problem do you want the sewer to solve? And, Barnstable's mindset has been 80%. As I've talked to other people and other venues, it's 30 to 50%. Looks like you're going to be somewhere in the 30+%. But that's a key variable. We jump to step 4 just because of the way the model is built. Not all towns know exactly what their wastewater treatment plant capital budget is going to be. We're assuming they don't. I think everybody's been doing stuff. But you can include or exclude that from the calculations. In the way I've done this demo, it's included in the per home assumption, which spreads that cost out over 20 years. That's not realistic, but nor is it realistic to put all the capital expense in year zero. So this is where it's hopefully close enough. And the way the model is built, we iterate the percentage of the percentage of the home stock that has to be touched by something in order to achieve the load reduction that you've called for. The outputs from the model, how many homes are we going to sewer, how many homes are we going to put NRs in, what's the total cost, either just with inflation or with inflation and financing cost, and that's a scary number, a present value of it, cost per kilogram of nitrogen removed. This is actually a sliding number when you include financing. I'm still getting my arms around that. Usually you think of that as a fixed number. It turns out it's got some movement in it. And the two big issues of cost per home for sewering and EIAs or NRs, you'll see a little sensitivity analysis to get a quicker picture of that. It also gives you the chance to say, all right, we're not doing the whole town at once, but we've got a 5-year, adaptive management period. We're going to put in X number of sewers and X number of houses. What would that cost us? It gives you that capability. Here's where it gets scary. We've all been talking for a decade or more that the Cape's going to cost $4 to $6 billion. You put financing and inflation in it, I have trouble getting it less than $15 billion. And that's why I say none of the towns, nor the state, nor the EPA are going to come up with enough money to fix it. And that's...
Excuse me, why is the cost $15,000?
$15 billion.
Well, any finite number other than zero, if the sewer load carry is zero.
Because it's all being carried by nitrogen-removing septic systems. So if you look at the numbers...
Oh, okay, it's just the poor ordering of the columns. I get it now.
Gotcha,
okay.
Sorry for that. But if you go from sewers at about a little under 59,000 and change, if sewer's doing everything, you're going to need probably 73,000, probably 20-25% more NRs, assuming they operate at 10 milligrams. So this slide, I think, prompts a whole separate discussion about how do we get the state to understand that we're going to need private-public partnerships to get this done.
Come back, Drecker.
What?
Come back.
Sure.
The line that says sewers, what are those numbers representing? Those
the number of homes
number
that are
of
sewered.
homes on the whole Cape Cod.
Yes. That would need to be touched to fix the problem at getting the load down by 50%.
That's fine. It's not dollars, it's units.
It's sewers, yes. Just a couple of other sort of side topics. I mentioned the Wellfleet peer review, and there was a hybrid plan. Applying the numbers that they came up with, you might be able to save $20 to $40 million by not doing a sewer-only approach. And then that's a net present value. When I shared this with Russ Kleekamp, who did that peer review, he said, yeah, but you got to understand that's before the SRF loan forgiveness, but it's also using the worst possible, worst-case assumptions that there no retrofitting for existing septic systems, and you're using the 26.25 as your influent number, which hurts the case. So it's as conservative as he could be. And the SRF issue is a continuing issue. To my earlier point about how are we doing for time? I'll get out of here pretty quick. Infrastructure as a service, this liquid-only thing, I know Alex Gamoda has addressed this body, and it's sort of the mini computer equivalent to the personal computer, which would be the NR. And I just got another preliminary report. It's basically half the collection system, the way they're looking at it, it's half the cost of a regular sewer system, collection system. So there may be an opportunity for small, 50, 100, 300 homes to connect. I know Barnstable doesn't like distributed processing, but if you can collect and connect to the sewer line, that may have legs. So we're going to look at that kind of thing for places that, and this is, to me, an important thing, and I wrote a note to the ad hoc committee saying, you can't just pay attention to what MEP and DEP say is your minimum. You got to take care of the town and what the town wants to do. And right now, there's some villages within Barnstable that aren't being paid attention to, and this may be a way that, they can connect to the existing sewer a quarter of a mile away, but take care of a village or a community. So it's just something adding to the game that I think is worth exploring. And let's see. That's it for this, so bear with me for just a second. Have I confused you, or?
I just have one quick question. When you talk about sewers, are you talking gravity sewers?
Whatever the mix is, remember, this is a high-level view.
Yep.
And that distinction wasn't made. It's just, generally, it's $100,000 a house.
The only thing is the liquid-only system is very similar to what we're actually sort of adopting, which is the low-pressure system. So we have very, Amy, of what we're doing right now, 20% is gravity or even less?
I should have that number, but I would say it's less than 40%.
Yeah, maybe 70%. We're doing 70% low-pressure sewers and 30% gravity. And that's, we've seen some real cost savings by using the low-pressure systems.
Here is the model. You can see there are a bunch of, wait a minute, why isn't that showing? I'm over my head here.
Well, you've advanced, but it's not showing.
Come on.
You ready to straighten them out, Kristen?
Maybe.
We should extend it.
Yeah, we will for Maggie. Yeah, we will.
Basically, I want to get that to show.
Okay, let's see.
Wait a minute. No, not Word. Okay. Sorry, if you can help.
Yeah. It's going to be
That's the picture.
So let's get rid of.
Get rid of the PowerPoint. That's not what I'm trying to show, though.
Which one do you want?
I want this.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, we're there.
Yep.
Oh, and that other thing keeps coming back, and I don't know how to get rid of it.
Escape.
That's,
This is Windows 11, it's annoying.
my apologies.
I don't know what that is there.
All right, well, that's where I want to be. Let's hope we stay there. Okay, workflow. Start, what you'll see across the bottom of the screen there are yellow sheets and red sheets. There are about a dozen separate spreadsheets in this model. The red ones you don't want to touch. That's where all the work is done in the background. You start mucking around in there, you're probably going to break the model. The yellow ones are the ones I'm going to really walk you through. You start with the assumptions, demography, and then the town cost calc is the primary thing we're going to work with, but you can also look at projects. And
Bruce, I just have to do a procedural thing. How much more time do you think you would like?
I can do this in 5, but I understand we're running out.
That's okay. So I also want to give this one back here, Maggie, a chance to talk on one of her things. So is the committee fine with adding a potential half hour to this meeting?
Yes. No. I mean, I have somewhere I'm supposed to be at 7 o'clock.
Can we
20
do
minutes,
15 minutes?
15 minutes is okay.
Okay. All those in favor of extending past 6:30 by 15 minutes?
Aye.
Aye, okay, so moved. Thank you.
Okay, start with town demography. Each town has a number. The number 9, and Falmouth here is number 4. The whole Cape is number 20, if you can see that. And it talks about the number of houses and the number of houses that are already sewered, if that's an interesting or an issue. This is publicly available data. You can, if it's yellow as a field, you can change it. So you can do whatever, makes sense to you. The assumption inputs, I went through in the PowerPoint presentation. The 2 big ones are the cost per house. You should recognize all those numbers just going down the list. We talked about them. In the town cost calc, these are the 4 steps. First is, what's the geography? That's up here. I'm going to use that. You can follow me. What piece of this problem do you want sewers to fix? Here we said 50%. We jump to step 4. Are we including a separate wastewater treatment plant capital plan? No. And then you pick the percentage of the home stock that's going to be touched. And it calculates cost with inflation, cost with inflation and financing, the modeled nitrogen removal target. In blue here, 594. 593 is the solution given the inputs you did in steps 1 through 4. And it tells you how many homes are going to be touched by each. So where it gets time-consuming, come on, is if I change this to 43.8%, and it only goes to 1 decimal place, and hit enter, the answer turns green. That says this is the lowest cost solution that solves the problem based on all your 15 assumptions. It also talks a little bit about cost per kilogram removed, and you can change town. You can go by a watershed. That's number 1. That's a recent addition. I talked about sensitivity analysis. If you take this 6.309 billion number that translates down here, this is NR costs for every $10,000 increment on the y-axis, and this is $10,000 increments on the x-axis for sewering costs. So you can, if it's red, it's more expensive than the point solution. If it's white background, it's less expensive. So you can get a pretty quick way to say, if I change something, how much has, or if I change one of those 2 big numbers, how much of an impact does that have on what it's going to cost? Last 2 slides, it gives you the chance to say, if I'm just doing a project, 5 years, I'm going to do 20 septic systems a year and 36 sewer connections in a year, how much is it going to cost me based on those inputs? So that may be as close to tactical as we'd want to get. And then if you don't have a budget yet for your wastewater treatment plant, this is a way to help build what not only the capital costs would be, but what would O&M cost along the way. These other things you really don't want to get into. And that's it. And I'll just say that reiterating this is still in beta mode. I'm looking for folks who would find this useful to explore with me. So I'm happy to demonstrate it. I'm happy to pull it apart with anybody who would have interest. And thank you very much. I took more time than
No, not good.
I told you I would.
No, it was all good. Ken?
So I guess a couple of things. Yeah, you touched on the no-interest loans, and because you have an interest factor in there.
Yeah.
And I presume that reduces the cost.
That's a question of who pays for what. And we're trying to stay away from that. I mean, I know you are leading the charge at the State House on getting refundable credits and all of that, and that's good. But this, it's complicated enough as it is.
Well, let me ask it this way.
Yeah.
Does that differentially affect the cost of sewering versus on-site systems?
Well, for the town, it would, yeah.
Right.
Sure.
So, and then the other, I mean, I keep coming back to the fact that we just did a sewer for the Little Pond system, which didn't cost $100,000 a house, anything close to it. But on the other hand, we already have a wastewater treatment facility built.
Right.
And that was built, initially in 1987, became operational. So those are old dollars that have been sitting there, and it's been upgraded along the way at some cost, but
I think it's really looking at future upgrade and capacity additions here, not just what's...
I'm not sure how much capacity we will need to add to the plant. Maybe Amy can illuminate us on that, but I think we have a fair amount of capacity at the plant currently. The issue is really disposal, and for that, we will need to build an outfall.
Right.
Which will be a substantial expense. But, when you come up with a number of $100,000, I feel like you're taking into account a lot of infrastructure that we may already have.
Yeah.
In the case of Falmouth.
And that's...
Maybe not in the case of some of the other towns.
Right.
This could be, if I took the collection system out of that, it'd probably be $50,000.
Yeah, well, I think collection system's going to be our main expense, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can use it
And
for
the outfall.
whatever...
Those are the two big expenses, the outfall and the collection system.
Right.
For us.
Ed?
Is this available, your presentation, Bruce, and the beta model to play with on your website, or not yet?
It's not yet available. I'm happy to demonstrate it to whoever and crawl through it. I just need to touch base with Nature Conservancy before saying you can have it.
How about your presentation slides before the actual?
I expect to post this to our website. This is available.
Okay, great, thank you.
Would you send it to me? Because we put any presentations we get, we post on our website too. So
Be glad to.
Steve? John?
No, I liked it. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you very much.
A lot of work on your part to put this together. Thank you. All right. We're gonna backtrack here, and although my name's on there, Maggie, would you like to kind of give the outline for the reserve at Quashnet Valley?
So, my name's Maggie McGaw. I'm from Wacoit. I'm also here speaking on behalf of Citizens for the Protection of Wacoit Bay. So this is about a proposed development called the Reserve at Quashnet Valley Country Club, proposed to be a project of 25 homes. And the site for this development is on a bluff immediately above the upper Quashnet River. We learned about it CPWB learned about it in mid-January, and we turned around and organized a letter writing campaign to the Massachusetts the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act office. And there were a number of organizations that also wrote in. There had been an online, like Zoom, consultation with quite a few stakeholders on January 7th that we did not attend. The public comment period ended January 22nd, and the basic ask on the part of the developers was that MEPA allowed them to submit a rollover EIR. MEPA came back and said, no, you're going to have to do a simple EIR. The rollover is a much more streamlined version. We thought when we heard that this was some kind of a victory. But Trout Unlimited, the organization Ed was talking about earlier, said, nah, that's not good enough, and they filed an appeal with the Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs, requesting that MEPA or the Secretary's office require a full EIR. As Trout Unlimited said, a simple EIR basically just works with the sort of the constellation of information that has already been submitted, where a full EIR would expand the scope of the EIR out to include areas not in the immediate vicinity of the project. And we concurred when we read the appeal, which, by the way, I have a copy of it. It's very interesting, very well read, very well written. The filing made by the developers literally does not mention Wacquet Bay. It is as if Quashnet River exists in isolation from the Moonicus River and Wacquet Bay. And in the filing, they said, that, they ticked a box and they said this will have no impact on coastal water quality, which we thought was wrong. So the position of CPWB is that given that Wacquet Bay and the Moonicus River have been designated as areas of critical environmental concern since 1979, and a concurrent designation of the Bay, Moonicus, and Quashnet of outstanding resource waters has existed for the same amount of time, we don't understand how the developers can be permitted to build a development that will send excess nitrogen through the groundwater to flow down gradient into the Quashnet, Moonicus, and Wacquet Bay. Our feeling is, what is the point of the regulations that have been established for ACECs and ORWs, anti-degradation rules that say no additional nitrogen should be added to an already nitrogen-degraded area? What's the point of those regulations if they are simply apparently being swept aside? There's one sentence in the MEPA decision that we found particularly problematic. It said, while the IA septic systems provide a treatment benefit as compared to standard Title V systems, the project will still result in additional nitrogen discharges, which the town, referencing Mashpee, would be responsible for removing elsewhere in the watershed in accordance with the comprehensive watershed nitrogen management plan. It seems to us that besides being wrong on the face of it, this amounts to a cost-shifting exercise. The developers are permitted to discharge up to 90 milligrams per liter because that's Mashpee's current standard. And in the filing, it says 11,000 gallons per day of wastewater. But it's the towns that will be responsible for removing that nitrogen elsewhere in the watershed in order to comply with the CWNMP. That leaves the taxpayers of Mashpee holding the bag. It also leaves the taxpayers of Falmouth holding the bag, because once that nitrogen comes into Wacquet Bay, it's 50% Falmouth's problem, where the property taxes assessed on these new homes will go exclusively to the town of Mashpee. So considering that there is an intermunicipal agreement between Falmouth and Mashpee, we thought we would bring this to your attention and, ask what you think Falmouth ought to do about this. That's it. Oh, and I did want to say that Peter Schilling of Trout Unlimited was hoping to be able to be here this evening. That organization has really taken the lead since the MIPA decision came down, and that's largely based on the 50 years of work that they have put into restoring the Quashnet River, and they've brought the sea run brook trout back to 400% of its numbers, their numbers in the late 1970s.
Peter Schilling is with Trout Unlimited, correct?
What?
Peter's with Trout Unlimited.
Trout Unlimited, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's the
Yeah. No, you put his name out there, but you didn't
Yeah.
just clarify the organization that he's involved in.
Okay, sorry if I
No.
misspoke.
Okay. Who would we comment to at this point?
Well, I don't know. The secretary, so the appeal went into the office of to the secretary of the Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. So that would be one place to write to say, you understand that Trout Unlimited has filed this appeal, and, you also want to state whatever your conviction is about this, that you would state that. Trout Unlimited has also asked, and I think Cape Cod Commission is doing this, but they've asked Cape Cod Commission to designate this as a development of regional impact. And I would say that, supporting that request would also be meaningful. I'm really not sure at what point this comes back to the town of Mashpee, but I know that members of the Mashpee Select Board and Conservation Commission are very concerned about this. So it might be, writing to them and say, we're with you, we don't think this should be allowed. I mean, really, they could, I think, connect. I think that the wastewater treatment facility at Southport in Mashpee has capacity so that the wastewater from this project, if they insisted on building it, could be piped to the Southport facility.
Is this a regular subdivision, or is it a 40B, affordable housing?
It is a regular subdivision,
okay.
And in the filing that they made with MIPA, they make a big deal out of the fact that this housing will go towards solving the housing crisis in the town of Mashpee. Not a single home is going to be designated as either affordable or attainable. I mean, based on the numbers in the filings, the break even for the developers is $975,000. So presumably they're going to want to make some kind of a profit. So presumably the per cost house is north of $1 million.
How does this differ from, there's build-out allowances in all the watershed plans. No one has proposed no more building on Cape Cod. I sympathize with you, but I'm trying to understand.
Well, I think there are places that are not cited immediately above outstanding resource water, like the Quashnet, where the cold water fishery is at risk. This is apparently, which is something I didn't know until I got involved in this is a spring-fed system. Yeah. And you go and you build on the bluffs where the springs
I'm trying to get at the legal, at the very least, it means that Mashpee, there's some agreement now between Mashpee and Falmouth on the percentage, the amount that each has to remove to be good to Aquoit Bay. So this increases the amount of work that Mashpee has to do.
Well, presumably...
the Falmouth should at least point that out to Mashpee, right? That's in your interest.
Yes. I'd say anything.
But then it's then Mashpee's problem. It's dangerous to us as the neighbors, but it's in their yard, in their property, in their town.
And it's also coming into the Moonicus
Right, but it means that...
Bay.
So who owned it before it was subdivided?
This company purchased the property. So there was a former owner of this property, and they obtained a permit in 1973 that has been exercised, has been used for the building of a country club and for other housing. The company that now owns it, this is what I understand, so I'm not certain that this is 100% correct, but my understanding is they bought the property, 254 acres in the mid-1980s for $15,000. And they're saying that they still need to make back their original investment.
Yeah, procedurally, we would have to create some letter or something, and would have to get it to the select board for them to issue it. So I will take a stab at drafting something for consideration at our next meeting if we want to pass it on to the select board for action, okay?
That would be great. We would appreciate it. And you know, it's also, I think, just important for you to know what's happening that does impact water that this committee is trying to fix.
Just briefly, you know, there is a lot of information on the Trout Unlimited appeal that they sent, which I went through a few weeks ago. And the crux of the matter is, you know, does it make sense to allow a development to add additional nitrogen to a distressed watershed, which Falmouth happens to share responsibility for? So what Maggie had said, that the tax revenue from these properties would go to Mashpee, but it becomes also a Falmouth problem with no tax revenue associated with it to remove an additional amount of nitrogen. It's similar to what happened on Sandwich Road project, where we got a distressed watershed, and that was a 40B, but you're adding housing that's going to add nitrogen that the town's going to have to remove.
Do you want to try to write the letter?
I'd work with you on it.
Okay.
So, you know, I think it's worthwhile for this committee to go on record going forward and go through the process, and I can contact the Mashpee Select Board current chair. Hopefully she will continue in that. Where are they on it, and what document to whom have they sent, or will they send? So we'll do some digging on it.
We are out of time. Tom, I will pass the minutes to the next meeting.
Well,
to give
the
you a
minutes
chance.
you have noted here, it says from March, but you mean April 15th? The ones that are in the agenda?
Let's not spend time discussing which ones, any that need to be discussed.
Right. I was going to move that we table agenda items 3, 5, and 6.
Well, we just did 3. No, we did do 3.
Oh, we did do 3, yes, sorry, you're right.
Yeah, we did 3.
5 and 6, sorry.
Yeah. Second that.
5 and 6, yes.
And the minutes you're referencing are the April 15th.
Yeah, you might have printed the early,
yeah.
you printed the early agenda, not the revised one.
No, I think I got the recent.
Does it say April 15th?
Does one you have there say April 15th?
Yes, it does. I realized I made a mistake and I revised it and sent it back out. Whatever. They are the April 15th minutes,
Yes.
okay? So we'll carry those over.
And are you going
How about a vote to
to
adjourn?
massage this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
thank you.
motion to table? Do we have to vote it?
Yeah, all those in favor of tabling 5 and 6 to the next meeting?
Yes.
Aye.
Okay, all those opposed, nay, it's unanimous. And a vote, a motion
That
to
was a
adjourn.
second. I seconded,
Oh, you seconded it.
for purposes of the minutes.
I don't know that I've been putting the second scenes in the
Up to the
minutes.
second, Ken. And I'm going to move adjournment.
Second.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.